We are breaking down the RBT training and testing material in a way that makes sense, that is relatable, real life examples, so we can get you to the next step. Because your future as an RBT starts right now. Hey y'all, it's Dom, the BCBA mom, your behavior bestie, and welcome to a brand new series, How to Become an RBT. So I've already created a video on all the steps you need to take in order to become an RBT. I even created another video on how to pass your competency assessment. These are all two major parts to becoming an RBT, but during this series, we are really going to break down the 40-hour required training. So before you can even move on to any of those other steps, the first step is you have to complete a 40-hour RBT training, and it breaks down applied behavior analysis. Yes, the same applied behavior analysis that we go to grad school for. They're giving it to you in 40 hours. And sometimes it may feel like the 40-hour training is not enough, that you're not comprehending, that you feel like you're learning a new language. Once you start to understand the concepts and principles, you actually realize I've been doing this my whole life. In order to pass the RBT exam, you have to know the terminology. So during this series, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We are breaking down the RBT training and testing material in a way that makes sense, that is relatable, real life examples, so we can get you to the next step. So grab your notebook, grab a pen and paper, and grab your favorite drink, and let's get to work. Because your future as an RBT starts right now. All right, let's get it. The first section we're going to discuss is all things measurement. That includes preparing for data collection, implementing continuous and discontinuous measurement, implementing permanent product recording, how to enter data, how to create the graphs, and then how to describe those behaviors in observable and measurable terms. So I feel like that's a really good place to start. Before we can get any further, let's actually define what is a behavior. So this is really big in the behavior community. Like, we all had to memorize this definition in grad school in order to get to the next level. So I'm so excited to share what Cooper, Heron, and Heward define a behavior as. So a behavior is the interaction of an organism with its environment
that is characterized by a detectable displacement in space through time of some parts of that organism, and that results in a measurable change in at least one aspect of that environment.
We just had to spit that off the top of our head. So that's a mouthful, and that just basically says in order for it to be a behavior, it has to affect its environment in some way. It has to have some type of effect on its environment, and it has to be observable. So let's just talk about what behaviors are and what they are not. Talk so much about data. This whole section is about data collection. You can't measure a behavior if you can't see it. So it has to be observable. It has to be measurable. That way you can count it or track it. It has to cause some type of change in its environment. Let's talk about what a behavior is not. We don't track or count feelings or thoughts or moods as behavior, right? What do those feelings look like in action? Does it look like you crossing your arms? Does it look like you rolling your eyes? Like, what is the observable behavior? So it's not to say that we don't care about feelings. I deeply care about feelings, probably more than a behavior analyst should. But however, caring about feelings is a subjective term, and we have to be analytic. Let's just do a quick exercise. I'm gonna list off a few behaviors or non-behaviors. And if you think it's a behavior, you give me a thumbs up. If you think it's a non-behavior, give me a thumbs down. All right, let's do a quick round of behavior or nah. Crying. Is crying a behavior? Yes, you can visibly see someone crying, the tears, right? It affects its environment. Feeling nervous. Is feeling nervous a behavior? It is not, right? We have to define what does feeling nervous looks like. Does that look like rubbing your hands together, pacing, even heart racing, right? But we can't just leave it at feeling nervous. Saying I need help. Is saying I need help a behavior or a non-behavior? Absolutely, because it is audible. We heard you say it. So whoever heard it now is going to hopefully come and help you. So yes, that is a behavior. Thinking about lunch. That is not a behavior, right? We don't track thoughts, right? Now, maybe sending a text saying thinking about lunch, or writing a note at 12 o'clock, go get lunch, or actually putting in that Uber Eats order, that is a behavior. But thinking about lunch, we cannot track that. Picking up a fork. Absolutely. We see it. It's happening. We can observe it. We can count how many times you pick up your fork in one meal, right? If we were tracking bites per minute, right? So yes, that is absolutely a behavior. It could be this simple, guys. It doesn't have to be this like big grandiose idea. Just when you are interacting with the individuals that you serve, whether that be kiddos, adults, or you using this at home, it's not this huge big concept. Just think of it as, can I observe it? Can I measure it? And if not, how do I describe it even further so that I can observe it and that I can measure it? And we'll talk about that in another section. Okay, so now that we've identified a behavior and a non-behavior, you get the concept that behavior is everything, right? So when you say, oh, the behavior analyst is coming, people automatically think of the negative behaviors that we do. But just think of behavior as anything you do that is observable, measurable, and has an impact on its environment. Now, let's talk about target behaviors, right? Now, those are the behaviors that we are targeting for change. As behavior analysts, as RBTs, we can't try to change everything about a person, right? We really shouldn't be trying to change a person at all. But that's a whole nother video and another topic. I'm gonna stay on topic. Only intervene on the targeted behaviors, and that helps to keep our plans ethical, with integrity. It helps to support the individual and have cultural humility. So although we may see behaviors that we want to track or try to reduce, that may be just out of the ordinary or don't fit nicely in a box or may be annoying or odd to others, if it's not socially significant, it's not a target behavior. Okay, so it's important to always read the behavior plan first to know what is the target behavior and not going in there and intervening on every single behavior that you do, because that's not fair, and that's also not what the plan is written for. Target behavior, again, is the behavior that you are targeting for change, whether that's language and you want to increase it, whether that's physical aggression and you want to decrease it, whether that's task completion at school, right? And that is what you're targeting for change. Now that we've identified the target behavior, the next part is creating the operational definition. So, for example, we talked about physical aggression, right? But if I just said the term physical aggression, that can look like a lot of different things to a lot of different people based on what you perceive physical aggression is, right? So some people can feel like, oh, because, you bumped into me in a crowded hallway, that was physical aggression. Some people can just think that if you staring at me the wrong way, like that is some type of aggressive precursor, right? So it's important that we define operationally what the target behavior is, because everybody who picks up this document, which is the behavior support program or the behavior intervention program, whatever you call it at your agency, when they pick up this document, we don't want them to assume what this behavior looks like. We want them to know for sure, and that's why we include the operational definition. An operational definition describes the behavior in clear, objective and measurable terms. For example, instead of saying Johnny is aggressive, a proper operational definition would be Johnny hits others with an open hand, making contact at least once per instance, right? And I know you're like, that's excessive, but we need to know what it looks like. Try to be as specific as possible so everyone know what they're looking for, but they also know what they're not looking for. Because if he's coming in for a high five, then that is a non-example of physical aggression, and you may have to include that as well. Which brings me to my next term, topography. So topography refers to the way a behavior looks. So if we're talking about fighting can look different depending on the context, depending on the setting, right? If you're fighting, are you fencing? That's a form of fighting. Are you kickboxing? Are you in taekwondo? Are you boxing? Are you, the fighting can look different. So when we are creating an operational definition, we want to include the topography of the behavior or what it looks like. So I've had several interviews with, parents or caregivers, and they would say, oh, my child does this or my child does that. My next follow-up question is usually, can you tell me what that looks like? Because I want to make sure we're on the same page. It's very important that when we are describing a behavior, we know what it looks like, which is the topography. We have a really clear and objective operational definition that just helps with consistency of the program. Another term that we are going to talk about is observable. Observable behaviors are those that can be seen and measured. So if we're going to get into data collection in a bit, but it's very important that a behavior is noticeable enough that we can actually count how many times it's happening. So if I am tracking hand raising behavior, it is very observable what my hand raising, that when I am engaging in that behavior and when I'm not. Okay? Our next term is measurable. We were just talking about the hand raising behavior. Now, if we were to rewind that video and watch it over, and we actually took some data, how many times did I raise my hand? Let's count. Measurable behavior is one that can be counted and recorded using objective data. Data is everything, right? Like, that's all we talk about. That's all we think about. So we're going to kind of dive into it a little deeper. But really what it is data is the recorded information from measurement. So whatever you recorded when you were measuring that behavior, that is your data. It is for essential tracking of progress and making informed decisions. So you may hear this term a lot in the field. We make data-driven decisions. Everything is data-driven, right? If we need to change the plan in any way, if we need to add extra support in any way, we need to have the data to support those decisions. That's why data is so important. So once we learn all of those other terms, it gets us to this point, which is our data point. And once we have enough data points, we are able to make our graph. Once again, this is how it all flows. We identify what a behavior is, and then from that, we identify a target behavior that we want to change. So within that target behavior, we have to make sure there is an operational definition, so everybody knows what we're looking at. It has to include the topography. What does the behavior look like? It has to be measurable, which means you have to be able to record it. It has to be observable so that you can record it. And that will get you to our data. All right, so that's all we have the time for today. Follow my Patreon if you want some mock exams and mock study questions to go over this section, and some practice videos so you can practice collecting your own data. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.